Dear Lord, we are so incredibly thankful for the lives that were saved last week during the storm. While some experienced hardships, there were so many good things and good people that came together and came out. I also want to say we're thankful for this class and this church, for being open-minded, for being good listeners, and for being accepting and caring people. It means so much to our family and this community and all of us. Amen.
Thank you, Roy. Good job. Okay, so Annette, are you up? Okay, Connie's up. They don't tell me anything. They treat me like a mushroom.
True. I'm, for the new people, I'm Connie McFarland, and I'm the education chairman for this rowdy group. And it's my pleasure today to introduce a panel, beginning with Paul Allen, and we'll also have Annette Murray speak in a bit, and Roy will speak again toward the closing of the time. But Paul is the owner of a group called Caring Transitions, and that's coming out of Bixby and Broken Arrow, and he does senior relocations for those of you who are thinking about getting out of your 4,000 square foot home down to a 100 square foot apartment somewhere. That's his specialty. And he uses his skills as an educator and also as a healthcare person to kind of work through all of the dynamics of people giving away things and keeping things, and that's a really big job and very needed in our community. He is an OSU grad. He's also an alumni of Northeastern. And he's going to talk to us today about issues facing the LGBTQIA plus community. So I turn it over to Paul.
Can you hear me okay? Oh, I can hear myself. Okay. So it's nice to meet you all. Nice to see you. It turns out I knew some faces when I got here, so that was nice thing. One of my former bosses is actually here. I worked at Oklahoma Heart Institute. Seems like many, many years ago. So we're here to talk about the issues facing the LGBTQ, and we keep adding letters. And so I'll go ahead and confess, I'm an older guy, so I also struggle with all of this new lingo that they keep throwing at you. And so here's my response back to that. I just kind of go with it. It's okay. And the thing is, it's accepting that's the important part, not whether or not you get the right pronoun and all the right names and all that kind of stuff. We've got to just go with it. It's what's more what you're accepting. So the first thing I'm going to do, there's my introductions, but she's already covered all of that. So.
You sure? Okay.
Yeah, I think you did. I think you gave all of that. So yes, I have done lots of things. Either I am 59 years old and I basically haven't figured out what I want to be when I grow up. So that's kind of where I'm headed with those kind of things. And lots of things, life happens, and so a lot of my changes have happened because of just life is going on, and I've changed professions over the time. But I was a school teacher for a while, then I went into healthcare administration, and I worked at Oklahoma Heart Institute, then Hillcrest. Then I became a healthcare consultant, and I did that for 15 years and traveled around the country working with different things like interim management, and they just needed someone to work for so long, and that's what I would do. And then when COVID hit, that's when I ended up getting a new job, and I bought a franchise and started my own company where we do the senior relocation services. So first thing we're going to do is talk about give you some terms so that we're all on the same page. And if you've heard new terms and you don't know the definition, you can ask me when we get to that little point, and I'll see if maybe I don't know the term either. But LGBTQI plus is an abbreviation for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning, intersex, asexual, and more. So the plus as and more. And one of the reasons we added the plus is because they keep adding letters. So just a quick glance at some of these. A lesbian is a woman who she can also identify as a gay or a woman, but she's attracted to other women. A gay person is someone who's attracted. This was the overall. So I'm going to back up a little bit. When it first started out, you were either gay or straight, right? Well, now we figured out life is a spectrum, and in reality, I'm a big believer in the bell curve, and I'm a big believer in the spectrum of 100% this or 100% that, but most of us live somewhere here in the middle, in everything, whether it become your musical abilities. Are you a musician or not? Okay, well, some of us, there's a whole spectrum. There's, not everybody's Kathy Venable. Well, here, so you got the excellent, she's back there, one of my good friends. So you've got someone like Kathy and Kelly and some of you that are over here, they're absolutely incredible musicians, but then you have people that can't carry a tune in a bucket. But then there's this whole spectrum, and some of us fall on that category. And so it's the same way with these different terminologies. So when they first started out, you were either gay or straight. So when you talk about what do you mean these new identities? Actually, these identities existed all along. They just didn't have a name for them because you picked either gay or straight. When they first started out with gay rights, it was gay rights. Then they realized, well, there's more terms. So then it became lesbian and gay rights. And then it became, so then they were calling it GLBT. Then they decided the L needed to be first because women were more oppressed, and they were joining with the feminist movement, so they put the L first. That's how it became LGBT. And so it also started to become an umbrella that if you were some type of, not straight, this is a movement you can join or feel welcome because we're going to fight for your rights. You can love who you want to love and that's who you're attracted to, not just basically what the majority is. So that's why. So when you hear the word gay, sometimes it does encompass a lot. Bisexual is someone that's attracted to more than one gender, and this is one that they talk about the differing ways, and they're the ones that move a lot on the spectrum. I know that one of the things was transgender, so we're going to talk about transgender. We'll tell you that it is transgender, not transgendered, with the ED on the end. And that goes back to a grammar thing, but that happens a lot. The ED gets added on. And you notice it more in writing than you do speaking because transgendered kind of sounds the same when you're speaking, especially if you have an Oklahoma accent. So transgender is an umbrella term for people whose gender identity was assigned something at birth, but that is not how they identify. As they've grown older, they feel like it's not how they identify. Very important to know that it's we're going to talk about non-binary, but transgender people are prescribed hormones by their body sometimes. They sometimes undergo surgery, but none of that has to happen for you to actually identify as trans. They also use the word trans. There are some outdated terminology that you don't use. You all have heard transvestite. You've heard cross-dresser. Those are terms they don't like to use anymore. So most of the times those are not used. You will meet older people that are in the trans community that still use that term. They identified that term in the 1960s, and they kind of like that word, and they've stuck with it. And that's okay. You can call yourself anything you want. But those two terms usually most people don't use. The proper term basically to be used would be trans. Just the little shortened trans kind of emphasize that. And it's also very important that they don't actually have to go through the whole procedure or anything like that to identify. Queer is another word that's come up, and this really bothers older people in the community. When I was a child, queer was a slam, okay? That was not something that you wanted to hear. They have decided to embrace that again. In the younger community, so you meet anyone under the age 30, they love that word. And if you're over the age of 50, you're like, so we just got to let that go. So it is okay to use that. I'm big on it's all intent and context is everything in any way you say. So in other words, I can say, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Okay, there's a big difference there, okay? You can tell when I'm picking, but I said the same word, or thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, I said the same word, so sometimes you don't notice that in a text or reading, but when you hear my context. So it's the same way when you use the word queer, how is it being used? So that's one of the reasons, but it's the big take the word back. We're going to take the word back. I would recommend, I wouldn't use that word in referring to someone or referring to anyone unless that's the word they're using. That's just mine. Just let them go with that. But if they keep identifying themselves queer, you can go ahead and say, well, they're queer. So It's also a great word because it encompasses everything. It's basically a catch-all for everything. So it's queer is the new gay. Intersex is another important thing, and this is none of you were there when they filled out your birth certificate correctly, and you're not the one that told the doctor your name or your sex or your address. Usually Dad did that. Sometimes Dad didn't even know what was going on, and he's filling out that birth certificate. So that's where that comes from. Intersex is actually a true medical phenomenon where the fact is that a person can have innate sex characteristics of both sexes or not as easy. Often we hear the terminology from people going, well, you know what sex you were as soon as you're born, anybody can do that. Well, that's actually, 99% of the time that's true, but there is the case where they're not. And so they are assigned a sex. Many trans people fall in this category where, they made the wrong decision. They decide we're going to have, you've got to decide, are they going to live as a girl or a boy? They're telling someone with a newborn baby that. You make the decision, and then later on we decide that that was not true. And it is truly a medical condition. Intersex people, and they're different than trans, even though they sometimes cross over those types of things. Many people in intersex do not associate with the LGBTQ community, and many of them are completely what we call stealth. And that's also true of stans. And so what I'm saying about stealth, and of course you know what stealth means, you're flying under the radar. Many people are stealth with all of their identity because in reality it's your private life. You don't need to announce this to everyone, so you just don't tell anybody. So a lot of people that are intersex, you would never know. They've never told anyone. The only people that would know would probably be their medical professionals who are bound by confidentiality, right? And so they just never tell anyone, and they've lived their life that way, and they should be allowed to live their life that way. Many trans people, many trans people actually, for their own mental health, they find the best way to do, I'm going to live my true self, and I'm going to move away from here, and I'm going to move someplace else and start living my new life. And they basically cut all ties. And that's the healthiest things for them. You interact with people that are intersexed or that are trans every day, and you don't know it. Okay, they're the clerks at the store, someone you work with, someone you went to school with, etc. And that's their private life. And you know what? You either like them or you don't like them because of who they are, not because of their identification. Okay? There's lots of people I don't like, and it's not because they're straight. Okay. You did say they cuss a little? Okay. They say you cuss a little because let's remember, a-holes are in every group that you can imagine. They cross all races, religion, sexual orientation, age groups, right? Am I not correct with that? Okay, they're everywhere. They're on the spectrum. Connie said they're on the spectrum. Some of them are really bad, some of them are okay. So an asexual person is another group that's kind of joined this movement because the LGBTQ movement tries to embrace the idea that your sexual orientation shouldn't matter, or you should be proud of who you are. And asexual are people that are not sexually attracted to anyone. They feel that whole, they're just not. That's not a part of their life. And the thing is, it's all, you think of your whole life, it's all a part of different things. But some people, that's just not a big deal to them. So they really have no attraction to anyone. Okay, and that's another group that's.
I have a question.
Yes.
The distinction between transgender and binary or non-binary, is it based on election?
Like they're select your group. Yes, it's kind of an identification, and that's my next one is non-binary. Thank you for leading into that. Non-binary is another term that a lot of people. To me, it's kind of a new term, and let's go back to binary means yes or no. There's two things, right? Black or white. Okay, that's a scientific. Non-binary is saying that's back to. So if you're thinking binary, you're either male or female, straight or gay, right? Non-binary says, no, I really identify with both genders, and I identify with both orientations, or it's more than that. And it goes back to that spectrum. And so this is a term that a lot of, especially younger people, are starting to identify. But when they come up with some of these new terms, and you meet with a bunch of older people, people will go, well, thankfully somebody has come up with what I am. because I just never dreamed that was that was the identification that I should identify. And so another thing you will use a lot, you'll hear gender fluid. And so the word gender fluid they use, and I think of fluid flows, and so that's what they're saying. And often they fall in love with a person, not a gender. So in other words, I'm not out there looking for a girl, I'm not out there looking for a guy, I'm looking for someone to fall in love with. And so that is an encompassing. Probably, we really think about it, probably people are more non-binary than they are anything else if they really think about if they were more open to just falling in love with who they see. So, the plus, we threw that in there because in case we didn't get yours, we get your thing. And I don't know if you also noticed, they all have a little heart. Everybody gets a flag. So we all have a different flag. And everybody has a different colored flag. So I would have gone over all those flags, but we had to be out of here before tomorrow morning, right? Okay, so there's literally, everybody gets a flag. Everybody has their own color. I don't know what all of them mean. I just know everybody has a color flag. And this is a big deal, and especially for younger people, they really like the idea that they have this flag that represents them, and they'll buy their little flag, and they'll have their bumper sticker and all those kind of things. Back when it used to just be the gay flag, the rainbow. So, yes?
The non-binary, is that where the pronoun issue?
It is. That's the they, them comes in on the non-binary. So the pronoun issues is the biggie, another thing. And that's another thing that a lot of society just freaks out over this pronoun issue. Okay, we don't use I don't use pronouns. They shouldn't do that too. You just use 7 pronouns in that little definition about how you don't use pronouns. Of course you use pronouns, that's grammar. And also, when they first talk about referring to themselves that they want to use they, them, bothered me. I'm saying, well, that's improper grammar because they is plural. Well, then I started thinking about it. No, it's not. You use they to identify to persons all the time. If you don't know exactly, delivery person's coming, what would you say? They are supposed to be here today you say that all the time, don't you? You refer to the delivery person who you don't know who it is. You have no idea who this person is. You don't know if it's a male, female, old, young. The delivery person's coming. So you say, they are coming. So you do use they, them to identify to a singular person. But we, in the old grammar world, I guess grammar is grammar, but in our old time, we would refer to they. Usually we use that they, them when we don't know who the person is. We don't know anything about them, so we use they and them. So non-binary, other people have embraced that. Why can't I use that anyway? And you can. You can refer to someone as they, them. And so pronouns are a big thing, and it's back to establishing their identity. And this also goes back to their own social, mental health or mental health issues. You want to be respected for who you are, correct? I mean, and we should respect people for who they are, whether it's their race, their religion, their sexual orientation, their socioeconomic status. You need to be respected for that. And when you talk about being proud of who you are, there's nothing wrong with about being proud of who you are. You should be proud that you attend this church, correct? I'm a member of this church. This is where I attend. There's nothing wrong with being proud of that. There's also nothing wrong with being proud of what your profession is, where you're a native of, all of those types of things. That's all makes up who you are as that whole person. That's all those things added to what you are as a life. And so it turns out your sexual orientation is that as well, and that pronoun. And so it kind of goes back to respect. So I call people with what they want me to call them. So if I'm Mike as opposed to Michael, I'm going to call him Mike because that's what he wants to be called. That's his preferred name. And then if someone wants to use a particular pronoun, etc., especially when if you're working with them, etc. Now, where I will defend the people who get upset over the pronouns, if I walk into a clerk in a store, how do I know what your pronoun is? You should give me the benefit of doubt if I say, thank you, ma'am, thank you, sir. If it's something that looks like that's what you're identifying, that's okay. The other thing you can do, just say thank you and just drop the sir and ma'am. But I don't know about you, Grandma Allen, who would be 120 right now, but Grandma Allen, who lived 103, she's in the back of my mind saying you should say thank you, ma'am, ma'am and sir, because that was so same way I open a door for everyone because Grandma Allen told me I should open a door for everyone. And I don't litter because of Grandpa Allen, too. So it sticks with you, but it is okay just to say thank you and drop the sir, ma'am. And that's kind of what I do if I don't know. That's that type of thing. But you know what? They also need to be more, they need to be more sympathetic to the fact that how am I supposed to know what you want to be called? And they could do it more polite. But I do understand there's every reason to be upset if I work with somebody and they've asked me to use, I want to use she or I want to use he. They should respect that. We work together. We've been over this, please, and it goes back to intent. She's going to the store. She is going to the store. So I use the right pronoun, but I really said it in an attacky way. I really said it in a way, and that is the thing. And that's where when you talk about teachers, when they say they're in trouble, the teachers for using the wrong pronoun, many times it goes back to, it's not the slip that they used the wrong one, because guess what? How many of you have called a very straight, very evident that they're a he, and you've accidentally said ma'am, or to a woman you said sir, because you just slip. You're not thinking, that's not even anywhere where you're thinking. You just slip. It's, oh, okay, yeah. Or on the phone and you call someone because their voice is deeper and you call them a sir instead of ma'am. It's just a slip. That's nothing. Or just even beyond that, someone yells, Paul, and I say, yes, sir, and I didn't even really think about who he said that. That should be, that type of thing should be excused. But if I deliberately use the wrong one, that's where there's an issue. Okay. Did we? I chased a rabbit there. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Cisgender.
Okay, so cisgender. That's another. I was going over some terms to make sure we know. So cisgender is the gender assigned at birth, and that is a term you'll hear a lot of LGBTQ activists use. Well, you're cis instead of trans. In other words, you're using the thing. Okay. So basically, I was assigned male at birth, and that's what I am. So that's my cisgender identity. It's the opposite of trans. So sometimes you'll hear that. You do not have to identify yourself as cisgender, just so you know. MTF is a term that you'll see is male to female. FTM is female to male. That is often a thing that they'll identify. And then gender dysphoria, and this is the psychological term that goes with that you are not identifying with what you've been assigned. And this is the mental health issue. And this is what counselors and psychologists discover. And we're going to talk a little bit more about dysphoria later, but that is a real term, and it has been identified years. This has been identified as an issue with someone that becomes trans. Okay. Next thing I was going to talk about, it's not about the restrooms. So when you hear about a lot of these court cases and things, that's not what it's about. It's not about the restrooms. And I'm going to get a little bit about that later, okay? It's not about the restrooms. And I'm talking about these restroom bills or Target allowing trans individuals to use that right. When people are arguing about that, that's not what it's about. There were 40 anti-LGBTQ bills introduced in Oklahoma this year. Really, only one of them passed, and we'll talk about that. There were over 315 across the U.S. Many of these are written by the same people, so there are think tank type things that come up with this bill. And this is in all industries, as you know. All industries, all activist groups have these groups that they come up with these bills, and then they get people in different state legislators to introduce them. But there were over 315. So we're going to talk about the fear, the reality, and then what was the reaction. So the fear. So I announced they are mutilating children. They are forcing children to alter their gender. In kindergarten, they're coming at them. Are you really a girl? Do you know for sure you're a girl? That's what that kindergarten teacher is doing. They're providing permanent damage. These are radical medical professionals. That's the fear that they install. If that's what you hear, are you against them doing that? Yeah. I'm against mutilating children. I'm against forcing children to alter their gender. They'll pick a story, sometimes that never even happened, or this one-off story where some kindergarten teacher goes rogue and starts doing this crazy stuff, and they make it sound like that's every kindergarten teacher in the country is doing this, okay? And as you know, that's not true, and that goes with any, not just LGBTQ, that's any issue. You hear these crazy stories, and then you find out it happened in Finland in 1972. Okay, yeah, that's really a problem here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So the reality, we have gender dysphoria. So we do have individuals that are not identifying. Think of the intersex child. think of the child, and then this starts to appear early on in life. You talk to parents of gay individuals, many of them, most of them are not hit, are like, well, where did that come from? They knew for various reasons, okay? And you talk to a trans or a gay individual. Counseling is very important. They do need to be identified. They do need to have counseling. This does need to be dug into. The other thing is it saves lives. When we identify children that are having gender dysphoria or other issues, it saves their life if someone reaches out to them and gets them the help they need. And it's not a quick decision. So we're heading up to the gender-affirming surgeries and stuff. If I decided I was going to transition to a woman, I could not go tomorrow to the doctor's office and they schedule the surgery, do that afternoon. The first thing my primary care physician would do is say, we're going to send you to a counselor and a psychologist, where I would go, and then they would start talking to me, and we'd start getting down to the thing. We'd find out whether I have gender dysphoria. We'd find out what some of my root bases and all those types of things. They'd start digging that out. And guess what? A lot of those, oh, that's not your issue. Goes this way. How many times have you been to a doctor, and this is what you thought it was, and then you find out the truth is over here when they start piecing it all together? Or you find out this is how you identify. Go back to all of our other terms, you find out some of the, I'm really over here in this bucket, I'm over here, or those kind of things. There are people that do everything for attention. How many people know people that are attention seekers? Okay. There are people, and I will tell you this. There are people, and I've met some, and I could name them, and I will not, that do everything because of attention. So in other words, they're going to start using they, them, because they can get all this attention because they've changed their pronouns. I'm going to change my name. I'm going to work. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. All for attention. They're out there. Okay. And my response to them sometimes you do realize you're doing more harm than you're good, because people are using you as that example. As this is, well, all trans people must be there. They're just doing it for attention. In reality, they're not. And I'll use a joke from Saturday Night Live. The guy said, I just don't understand this thing about this bathroom issue. So you're telling me that men are getting years of counseling, spending thousands and thousands of dollars to change their sex, have to get an entire new wardrobe, change their name, suffer discrimination from people, completely alter their life just so that they can go into the restroom to see a woman use the restroom. Isn't that crazy? And that's exactly, yeah, well, that's a lot of work for that. Why did you do that? So the joke is, why would you do all of that for that, if that's your aim? But somehow or another, that's what they say is the goal. So that's just not it. So do go back to, if you're going to transition, there's lots of counseling, there's lots of decision making, there's lots of soul searching. And the trans individuals that I know will tell you it was like the greatest relief when they discovered that they were going to be able to transition. They truly felt like they were their true self. And I don't know if any of you have personal friends that are trans, and they often don't want to share their story, but that is the root of it. They'll say, I'm finally who I always thought I was. And so that's the core of that. And it really backs up, and the trained psychologists and counselors will tell you they see this all the time. They also said they'll see that when it start down that path, they'll realize, no, you're not really trans, you're just gay. You're just gay that likes to wear fancy jewelry. Okay, that's it. And they go, oh, and then once again, they feel much better about that whole idea. So the one bill that passed on was called the Gender Confirming Care. I don't know if you heard about this, which was basically, it made it a felony to provide gender affirming care. They wanted it to be up to the age of 26. Okay, you're a legal adult at 18. You're truly a legal adult at 21. Oh my gosh, they raised it to 26. That was really wild out there. But they ended up backing it down to 18. The problem was this: it was a potential ban of. They were really leading to a potential ban of all gender confirming care. Period. That's where they were headed, regardless of your age. The lawsuit was challenged by the law. It struck fear in lots of providers, and especially the administration medical group. Are we going to be because of felony? And then what do you call gender affirming care? Getting a testosterone shot, is that gender affirming care? Estrogen shots, is that gender affirming care? If you read the bill, there's a whole bunch of that kind of stuff that falls in that category. And what in the world are they going to do with intersex children? You could make the whole delivering a baby and deciding that as a part of a felony. It really, and because of course the bill was written by, of course it was written by medical professionals. No, it wasn't. It wasn't even written by, it wasn't even written by lawyers. It was written by really radical activists that are trying to, it's not about the restrooms. Their goal is to try to outlaw everyone in that LGBTQ spectrum. That's their goal. They saw a weak link. Let's go for this. And what a weak link that you can go to is saying, oh, they're forcing children to have sex change operations when they're children. And by the way, it doesn't happen under the age of 18, really. That's not where things like that are happening. There is hormones and things like that are going on. Once again, counselors, medical professionals, and medical professionals that are trained in this. If you're a primary care physician, you don't usually go down that route. You send them to specialists who have all of the things that know about that counseling. They know how to identify this, et cetera. It's not just here's your some, whatever they give, whatever drugs you're going to give you. That's not how that works. They don't pass it out like candy. Okay? 18 other states have passed very similar bills. It currently is not being enforced, but of course it has struck fear in the healthcare industry. Are we going to be liable? And it's very similar to some of the anti-abortion bills as well. It's along that same lines. What do you do? And I, as a former healthcare administration, I get that. I've got to protect the assets of my thing. We cannot be doing something that's going to be a felony. But remember, our goal is to provide healthcare to people, correct? Okay. So there's that one. Okay, another fear we're going to go to, another case that we're talking about. This is the fear. They're showing porn in the classrooms. They're encouraging children to have same-sex attraction. Back to are you attracted more to a girl than a boy? That's okay. You know, okay. That's what kindergarten teachers are doing. Yeah, good. Encouraging them to use other pronouns. They're forcing every child to name their pronouns. They're recruiting children to the gay lifestyle. Now, I don't know. I used to be an educator. Let me tell you, I want them to set their seats. Don't eat the crayons. I'm talking about kindergarten. Don't eat the crayons, and we're going to be able to get in line. We really don't have time for these. They don't really have time for these crazy agendas. Trust me. Anybody here a teacher? We're a teacher? Yeah. Like that's really what you got time to do. Okay. The reality is some of the things, allowing counselors to be able to discuss normal development. So you have a child that is traumatized. They may not be able to talk to their parents, and they're supposed to be able to reach out to their counselor. It's supposed to be a safe place to talk about things. That's how we identify kids that are being abused at home, that are being neglected at home, correct? If we make it where, well, I can't talk about that, you've cut out a niche. Any counselor, they've got to be able to talk about almost anything, correct? They've got to be able to be free to talk about that. It's recognizing all people. It's recognizing the fact that there are gay kids in your school. The other thing is, it goes back to it saves lives. You know, the suicide rate is incredibly high in the LGBT younger community, especially if they feel like no one's listening to them. And they internalize a lot of things. You may be loving them as their parents, grandparents, neighbors, etc. But they also hear what the people say on TV. They also hear what these other people are saying, and they start internalizing that. And so we want to be able to make that, so next thing you know, the school's doing the same thing. Am I doing okay on my time? Oh my gosh. Okay. And there's not any porn in the school curriculum. So they did several things on public school policies. They tried to ban all kinds of things that could be said. None of these bills, most of them made out of committee. A lot of these bills are actually done for show. I'm going to show you how truly conservative I am, and these are all the bills I'm introducing. The State Department of Education is the one that's the best. As you know, the current State Department superintendent, he has introduced all kinds of wild policies. I don't think he's even an educator, as a former educator. If he is, he really lost track of where he was. The Attorney General Drummond says that they don't have the authority to make these kind of laws and rules. So that's all tied up in the courts. This is back to the fear of men coming in. If someone tells you a man's going to dress as a woman who's going to come in a bathroom and attack your wife or your daughter, yes, you should be. That's wrong. We shouldn't have that. Okay? But that's not really what's happening. There are 0 cases of drag queens molesting children. One of the reasons is if a drag queen ever molested someone, it would be one of the shortest thing because you'd be covered in glitter. So the victim. So it'd be so easy to identify that. There is actually, it's true. There's there's a meme goes around every time they release a news thing about someone molesting children or whatever. The thing is not a drag queen because it's usually not a drag queen. It's usually someone else. Transgender individuals are mostly stealth in public. Once again, like I said, you've interacted with people you had no idea that they were. And let's also get it. Assault by anyone to anyone is wrong. So regardless of who assaulted someone in the restroom, it's wrong. But you can't start targeting people and say, oh, they might. And it also goes back to the same way it's racist. It's like, well, that black man may rob me, so I'm going to forbid all black men coming into this store. Well, you also realize how inherently wrong that is. It's the same kind of thing. There are several drag queen things have been. This is another one where we've caught an easy thing, and this is where we're going to head. They've passed them, most of them, but it was basically going to outlaw the fact that you couldn't show the movie Birdcage, okay? And you couldn't show an old Milton Berle episode. Think about it, okay? Transgender restroom laws, there's some of those that are coming in, and there are states, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee, if you cannot go in a restroom unless it matches what your birth certificate said. Now, how are they going to enforce that? But that's what they did. So what happens next? Laws and bills are targeting marginalized populations, and it's not just the LGBT community, it's others. Who will be the next target? And then I use this, what I consider a classic poem. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jew. I was not a Jew. Then they came for me. And so the thing is, some of the groups that are behind this, their target is they're after a lot of people, including churches that are not teaching like they are. Okay, so who's next? And so it's one of those things, it goes back to equality and treating people with respect. And so there's that.
That's great.
Okay.
Can we hold Q&A until after that?
You can do whatever, you're in charge, Connie, so I'll do whatever you say.
If you, Annette, go. You're going to have to hand mic.
Sure, that's good.
They've got me all wired up.
Well, good morning. I'm Annette Murray. I want to introduce my family who's here. My dear husband, Kevin. Stand up, Kevin. And my sister, Susie. And thank you to them, because family is so critical when you are discovering for the first time that you probably have one of those kids on the spectrum living with you. Or maybe it's years later when they are young adults. So I'm going to speak with, just for a quick, but thank you for laying the foundation, because now I have many of those words used in my talk, and now they'll be experts. So I'm going to just talk about how important, first of all, our son Clay is 29. He lives in Denver. He is a trans male, and we walked with him. Well, he was ours from birth. He was adopted at age 6 months, and we just, we thought they're just the classic great parents, loving kids. And we have another son who is 35. He's in Austin. So it's just that great unconditional love, and a strong marriage has pulled us through it and helped us become the nurturing parents we felt like we always were, but we still even more want to be that way today. Faith and friends, two of the people we leaned on first was the family entity that surrounded us, and then the church community. Courtney met us a couple of times in her office, and we held hands and prayed. We were just like, we don't know what the heck we're doing. We need help. And she just said, we're going to pray first. And she led us down a couple of different paths and introduced us to different people. But also the way that education and learning is just critical. I mean, just like that moment up there, 10 slides. How many of you know something you didn't know before you came in here? Come on, hands up. I'm a teacher. I was a former elementary teacher, so I talk like that a lot. Anyway, Clay's timeline. He's 29. in high school, he began to be interested in a peer who was male, but talked openly in his, it was at Bishop Kelly in the religion classes, talked about his beginning to transition. And through Bishop Kelly's administration, they allowed him to stay and be part of the community. And those kids who had freshman year together walked that walk with, what was the child's name? Okay, no name. But, so there were discussions going on in our home at that time. Then Clay went to college, and Clay had a diagnosed chronic disease called dysautonomia. At age 16, we were at Mayo Clinic, and he just had, it was a breakdown of the involuntary systems that take over the body, that take care of the body. And so he was in a doctor's office regularly, probably twice a month in Tulsa. Then we went to Oklahoma City. Mayo Clinic was the furthest place we went, but we did come home with a diagnosis. And that has really nothing to do with his gender search, but it's his past. And I want to compare that later to how he is as a male. So we also had, let's see, right before COVID, nobody was seeing anybody, and he lived alone in a rental house. So we wanted to be part of, we didn't want him to be alone all day. And he went to his job and he'd come home, but we did a lot of meals together, and finally he said, I think I'm non-binary, and we were just like, help us, what is that, what's that mean? So he was searching, because he really didn't know which path to take. And then, keep in mind, this was COVID time, so there weren't a lot of, like the Dennis Neal Center had closed, but they were open on the phone. You could talk to a person on the phone. And we got some referrals to where Clay could get some counseling and also information on medical treatment. So we proceeded with that. I was also recommended by a professional to contact Dr. Al Carlosi. He was he's on staff at the Dennis Neal Center, but also on the OSU Counseling Center. So he spoke with us by Zooming. And then first it was Kevin and I Zooming. Then he said, do you think Clay would want to join us? And I said, well, how are we going to do that? He goes, we'll just have him over and sit on the couch and we'll all three talk. Well, we ended up Zooming, but we were all on our own screens. And that was more for us than Clay. But it kind of let Clay know, I think my parents are getting this. So let's see. So then it became more real. We had, Clay was, I said, how are you finding support as your journey is unfolding? And he said, well, I'm on Facebook. He said, Mom, there's a lot of groups on Facebook that I talk to. And then he would say, and TikTok has these great videos of all these people on the spectrum taking care of each other and really reaching out. And so that was, we felt pretty good about that because we didn't know any other individuals in Tulsa that were on the spectrum for his age. But let's go back to the child from Bishop Kelly. By the time senior year came, I'll just make up a name, Jessica, walked across the stage as female in, a dress with a gown on. And Clay had all those nice connections and trust building through those 4 years to rely on Jessica through the years. And they still are friends. But, that was 10 years ago. That's a long journey that has unfolded. So let's just go through, like I said, the unconditional love, our marriage. We just celebrated 40 years together. Faith is always our just rock solid go-to when we have issues in our life. And I think I talked to you about faith and friends in your church. So let's talk about Clay's life evolving as a young trans. He has, let's see here. So through the time we had more time together during COVID, and then he was beginning to reach out to those groups online, and then prayers, and I started talking more to my friends about being a parent of a transgender child, and it seemed like every time I opened my mouth, they had either a family member or a close friend dealing with a similar issue. So let's talk about Clay then and now. So he, it didn't happen overnight. This was 2 years of things unfolding in his life. So then, before transitioning, there was high anxiety, there was frequent illness, no belief in Christ, always changing friends, changing jobs, living in different places, and anger towards the world. He was very difficult sometimes to be with. Then as he became, his primary care physician was extremely supportive here in Tulsa. She okayed some of the meds, and then the Dennis Neal Center had some individuals who referred him to those psychologists and psychiatrists to get his testosterone. Testosterone made a huge difference in that dysautonomia presentation in his body. There were no more headaches. Heartbeat wasn't out of control. Digestion was resuming to be normal. So there were a lot of benefits that he was noticing, sleeping better. He's in more stable relationships now. And he loves to share his story online and with his friends. And we are thrilled to say that through TikTok, he met a fabulous lady in Denver. And she's just a normal young mom with a 10-year-old. And they're engaged. We just spent last weekend with them. And it's just, Clay really just changed his whole, I don't want to say he's a different person. He's exactly who God made him. He's exactly who we raised to be a loving, good citizen, kind, and nurturing to others. Less medicine needed for all those symptoms he had. And our relationship as a family is stronger. But we did immediately tell our first circle of family, then our second circle of family. And I just loved it when I sat down with my dad. He's 96, and I said, this is what's happening in our family. And I said, Dad, do you know what LGBTQ is? And he goes, I know what that is. And he was on the National Boy Scout Board, so he was very educated about LGBTQ. And he just looked at me and he goes, Annette, I am not going to love Clay any different than any other of my 18 grandchildren. We don't need to say that. Yes.
Terminology, you began saying trans man. So does that mean Clay was born female that chose to be a man?
Correct. He was born female, and that is all the documentation said female, and that's another thing. You got to go down this legal road to change everything. He needed a new birth certificate, new driver's license, new Social Security. Those things take sometimes up to a year to get it, and expensive because you need lawyers. So that was part of it. Oh, yeah. Okay. So that is our story, but through our faith and our friends and our prayer, we did it. We were riding that wave with him every single day. So thank you for listening. And I just think it's, everyone in this room has had struggles with family issues. This is really no different. It's just more in the news, and it's more, but anyway, Roy, it's yours.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful. Paul, thank you. When Connie first called, I said, it just won't take long. She told us that she was gay about 20 years ago, and told Barbara first, and then the next day Barbara told me. It's just kind of a non-event. We didn't love her any less than we did the day before, and still do. But then I got to thinking, it's a little more complex. First of all, you couldn't get married in Oklahoma if you were gay. And luckily, Tulsa judge Terry Kearns pushed the issue to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided that gay marriage could be done. And that was wonderful. And the next summer, about two or 3 months after that, Jennifer and Jill got married. They're still very, very happily married, and they have a wonderful, supportive circle of friends, and everybody in our family is just, okay, well, let's talk about something else now. So we go on. But I will say this, the reason we're at this church is because of the issue of gay marriage. We were very, very active. I was chair of the strategic planning committee and, an elder and just all sorts of roles in First Presbyterian downtown. And Jim Miller was just adamant against gay marriage. And every time I drive by there and see the word evangelical at First Pres, I think, well, that means we don't like gay marriage around here. And it's just fundamentally wrong. And so through our friends, we found Harvard Avenue, found the Challengers class. Told Barbara, I said, we need to make sure we're not jumping from the frying pan into the fire. And so we came to see Mark. Okay, do they want to get married here? I'll be glad to marry him. And it was the most wonderful church leaving experience that one could possibly have. And in large part because of the acceptance of this church. I could go on, and I won't because I think there are questions. Did you have a question?
I have a question. There are some issues with trans and women's sports. I wonder what the solution to this might be.
Oh, you're on.
Thank you, Roy.
What happens with a lot of trans, first of all, once again, there's not that many. They're taking there's these there's not like the women's sports have been flooded with trans women coming over there to do sports. It's not really happening, but it is an issue because there is some innate physical. There are some trans women that could lift an engine out of a car. Okay, I mean they still have that muscle mass of a man. Many of them don't because there's a lot of men that do go after physical fitness that couldn't do that either. So it is an issue, and also, but we also take the hormones, it changes things like that. Also, those hormones will fall in the category of the drugs you can't take, the drug enhancement and that type of thing. So I don't have an answer for it. I'm sorry. Except it is something that needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed more than just, well, they're a woman and they should be allowed to participate. Yeah, there's a few more issues to make that. Yeah. Yes. I taught elementary school, so I actually taught music, kindergarten through 5th grade. Here? In Tulsa. Lindbergh, and then I was at Mayo in Eisenhower when it was stuff like that.
Paul, I do want to say one more thing.
Do I have one of your kids?
In preparation, I asked Jill if she'd ever been afraid. And she said, we haven't, because maybe we don't hang out in places where you would be afraid. But she said a lot of it is Tulsa. She said, I'm not sure I could live, if we could live anywhere else in Oklahoma other than Tulsa. Tulsa has been totally supportive. I've said, if there's been any issues, the only issue was First Presbyterian Church.
Well, I have a question that's not as important as these other questions, but earlier on when you were saying the adding of the different letters, and you said they decided to do this and they put L first, and who are they? Or who is they? Which one is that? Yeah. Oprah, yeah.
I don't know that. See, that we use they. I don't it kind of general consensus is just kind of a.
But somebody has.
Somebody made that decision.
Yeah.
There was issues actually with the feminist movement. A lot of lesbians flocked to the National Organization of Women, et cetera. Then they ended up saying, well, we don't want lesbians there. They want to try to discriminate. And so it was kind of, then they flocked back over here. So see.
Oh, here, wait a minute. We'll turn you on right here.
Is that better? Okay. The best thing I think, and this would be true with any group of people that are marginalized, is that you stand up. So if someone at work makes a sexist comment or a racist comment or a homophobic comment, don't just laugh and ignore it. Either say, well, you shouldn't say that. Stand up for that. And also making sure that people that are in any kind of marginalized group, that you befriend them or just encourage them, that type of thing is and voting. I think you do need to look at people's a voting record. What are their things? It goes back to, I remember was it Susan Savage that used to say, I'm the mayor of Tulsa. That's not partisan. There's nothing partisan about sanitary sewers and roads and schools, and that's a very common thing. We need to focus more on looking at people that are talking about issues, not these. If someone's running on a campaign to have drag performances outlawed, that's our biggest issue. I mean, there's a lot of other huge issues out there, like roads and schools and things. That's the thing I have with the current school state superintendent. Everything he's talking, I mean, there are huge issues in our school that need to be addressed. Funding, curriculum, all of those, none of which have to do with social issues of any kind. So, and you just need to vote accordingly.
Well, thank you, Paul. What a delightful morning, and I think Connie and her committee were a little nervous about this topic, but I just think it was delightful. It makes me so proud of our Challenger group, and it makes me proud of our church, where our slogan is, live and love like Jesus. I think Jesus would have been very comfortable in here today and would share the love of this group. So congratulations and thank you. Have a great week.